Chris Hedges.
Well, reducing the election to personalities is kind of infantile at this point. The fact is we live in a system that Sheldon Wolin calls inverted totalitarianism. It's a system where corporate power has seized all of the levers of control. There is no way to vote against the interests of Goldman Sachs or ExxonMobil or Raytheon. We've lost our privacy. We've seen under Obama an assault against civil liberties that has outstripped what George W. Bush carried out. We've seen the executive branch misinterpret the 2001 authorization to use military force act as giving itself the right to assassinate American citizens, including children. I speak of Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son. We have bailed out the banks, pushed through programs of austerity. This has been a bipartisan effort because they've both been captured by corporate power. We have undergone what John Ralston Saul correctly calls a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion, and it's over.
The Citizens United, this was January 2009, I guess. That's a very important decision, Supreme Court decision, but it has a history, and you got to think about the history. The 14th Amendment has a provision that says no person's rights can be infringed without due process of law. And the intent, clearly, was to protect freed slaves. It says, okay, they've got the protection of the law. I don't think it's ever been used for freed slaves, if ever, marginally. Almost immediately, it was used for businesses, corporations. Their rights can't be infringed without due process of law. So they gradually became persons under the law. Corporations are state-created legal fictions. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, but to call them persons is kind of outrageous. So they got personal rights back about a century ago, and that extended through the 20th century. They give corporations rights way beyond what persons have. So if, say, General Motors invests in Mexico, they get national rights, the rights of a Mexican business. While the notion of person was expanded to include corporations, it was also restricted. If you take the 14th Amendment literally, then no undocumented alien can be deprived of rights if they're persons. Undocumented aliens who are living here and building your buildings, cleaning your lawns, and so on, they're not persons. But General Electric is a person, an immortal, super powerful person. This perversion of the elementary morality and the obvious meaning of the law is quite incredible.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy, the real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big all the big media companies. So they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table to figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long, when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all.
It's a divide and rule strategy by the corporate powers. Obviously, if they can split left-right opinion and put the left-right to focus on where they do disagree, like reproductive rights or gun control, they control the scene. And they keep the left and right from moving on where they do agree. And where they do agree would take power away from the corporate brokers, and it would get a lot of things done in this country. Look where they agree. 80%, almost 80% comes in for a higher minimum wage. That's a lot of conservative workers in Walmart and other places.
Right.
90% want to break up the big banks because they're too big to fail and they're risking another crash out of New York and Wall Street. A large majority want tough crackdown on corporate crime. They see it. They get ripped off as consumers. They get thrown aside as workers, and they get cheated as taxpayers. Here's the big one. Right-left against corporate welfare and what the right wing calls crony capitalism. That is really a powerful one.
Yeah, well, Jim, I'm very frustrated, and I think most members of Congress are frustrated with how little the American people really know as to what's going on in Congress, or in fact are knowledgeable about the most important issues facing this country. The corporately owned mass media, in my view, does a horrendous job. We spend more time with violence and sensationalism and 5-second sound bites rather than honest debate about the terrible crises facing this country. This country is undergoing major economic decline. Our people are becoming poorer. We're one of 2 nations in the industrialized world without a national health care system. We lead the world, the industrialized world, among poverty for our kids, etc., etc., etc. Where is the debate? How did this happen? Who owns America? We're not having that debate. So I think that having some people from the right and some of us who are progressives on the left really clash and talk about the future of America, talk about the problems facing this country, will give the American people an opportunity to hear serious debate, and I think that that's a real positive thing.
The final stages of capitalism, Karl Marx predicted, would be marked by global capital being unable to expand and generate profits at former levels. Capitalists would begin to consume the government, along with the physical and social structures that sustain them. Democracy, social welfare, electoral participation, the common good, investment in public transportation, roads, bridges, utilities, industry, education, healthcare, and the protection of the ecosystem would be sacrificed to feed the mania for short-term profit. These assaults would destroy the host. And this is the stage of late capitalism that Donald Trump represents. Trump and his reactionary capitalists, who have seized 34 of 50 governorships and 68 of 99 state legislatures, 49 of which are bicameral.
plan to oversee the final campaign of corporate pillaging of America and the rest of the planet. Now is the time not to cooperate. Now is the time to shut down the systems of power. Now is the time to resist. It is our last chance. The fanatics are moving with lightning speed. So should we. We must engage in these battles on the local and on the national level. We must, in our own community, mobilize to prevent the deportation of undocumented workers, the evictions from homes of the unemployed, those with disabilities, the elderly, or those living on small fixed incomes. The reclaiming of our democracy will only happen when we make our physical presence felt in public spaces. We once had within our capitalist democracy liberal institutions, the press, labor, third parties, civic church groups, public broadcasting, well-funded public universities that were capable of responding to outside pressure from movements. They did so imperfectly. They provided only enough reforms to save the capitalist system from widespread unrest or, with a breakdown of capitalism in the 1930s, from revolution. They never addressed white supremacy and institutional racism, misogyny, or the cruelty that is endemic to capitalism, but they had the ability to ameliorate the suffering of the poor and working men and women. These liberal institutions exist now only in name. They are props in the democratic facade. There are, as the political philosopher Sheldon Wolin wrote, no institutions, certainly left in the United States, that can authentically be called democratic. We will have to build new radical movements, and most importantly, new parallel institutions that challenge the hegemony of corporate power. It will not be easy. It will take time. We must not be seduced by foundation money and grants from established institutions that blunt the radical restructuring of society. To recover our mental balance, we must respond to Trump the way victims of trauma respond to abuse. We must build communities where we can find understanding and solidarity. And we must allow ourselves to mourn. We must name the psychosis that afflicts us. We must carry out acts of civil disobedience and steadfast defiance to re-empower others and ourselves. We must fend off the madness and engage in dialogues based on truth, literacy, empathy, and reality. We must invest more time in activities such as finding solace in nature or focusing on music, theater, literature, art, even worship. Activities that hold the capacity for renewal and transcendence. This is the only way we will remain psychologically whole.